So, the Chinese diaspora and the Indian diaspora, where's the VJ Pajit, have a long history of Zionist normalization and shilling for Zionist China, much like their home countries. Today we're going to break down their grift. We're going to tie it to, what's the guy, Neville Singham, and just really expose that, because these people are dishonest. You know, these people, they're grifters, they're opportunists, especially VJ Pajit, especially Amanda Yee, and especially the Chinaman himself, Carl Jha, and Justin Pajit as well, Justin Padur, aka Justin the Pajit, okay? Because here's the reality. China and India are both Zionist collaborators. And we know Carl Jha is a massive grifter. Just listen to what he says here.
That is supports an independent Palestine. Hey, China do that, that's so stupid. I was like, what? This is not a new Chinese position. This has been the Chinese position since forever. China has always, Xi Jinping didn't say anything new. He's reiterating the policy of Mao, policy of Deng Xiaoping. China has always...
And the fact that Carl Jha is praising liberal Zionist Deng Xiaoping, that's a big problem. Carl Jha, he's a known Zionist and a grifter.
What we said is supports an independent Palestine. And with East Jerusalem as its capital, this Chinese position has never changed, and it's just that these go ahead.
No, they've just been remarkably consistent. Like, despite military or financial aid going up and down, they've been remarkably consistent on their positions in international bodies and that kind of thing. They never really flip-flopped ever.
And notice how they're using the framework of international law, which is inherently Zionist.
They've just been very standard. And one thing that I really thought was...
Oh, and notice how Caleb Mopstein associate, Jenny Lin is watching Carl Jha. That's another big red flag. And notice how the Palestinians that Jha is talking with are from the West Bank and not from Gaza, or not refugees from occupied 1948 Palestine, who might have a different position on China than grifters from the West Bank.
Dope as hell was I believe it was the Chinese UN ambassador. I think it was this week. He just said, he got up at the press conference and he's like, legally Palestinians can fucking kill you guys. They have a right to resist. They're cool, man. This is legal. It's not a crime. They're allowed to fucking do back.
But they don't talk about the Zionist normalization of Zionist China.
Backflips before they blow up your tank. That's just normal. That's international law.
It's really interesting because us living in the U.S., we have a government that is always preaching rules-based international order, rules-based international order, rules-based international order. But you see, time and time again, it's
Wait, Carl Jha has money for a nanny for his son? Fake communist, fake motherfucker, bougie-ass grifter. This guy's a dickhead. This Carl Jha guy... Oh, we're going to expose this guy, man. Because Carl Jha, he's a grifter. He's a dickhead.
No rules for me, but not for thee. Any agreement that we have. I mean, this is Iran is finding this. Any agreement.
Iran, the country that secretly trades petroleum, pistachios, and oranges with the Zionist entity. Fuck Iran. We know what they did in Iraq. So, yeah.
Any agreement that we have, it can be torn up at any moment. And I think that's kind of what's infuriating a little bit to Americans, when they see that China is consistent in policy, is like,
China's not consistent. China's a bunch of fucking grifters. China's evil, manipulative, and cunning. Again, we're going to get into this article here. China's ties with the Zionist entity are hindering the Palestinian struggle for freedom. This is from December 1, 2024, and it's by Shireen Akram Boshar. And China says China's pushing a flawed peace process while deepening ties with the Zionist entity. Again, this man, Karl Jha, is a grifter.
you mean you're still honoring your position that you've held? Like, it's almost like an attack on our morals, right? And our convictions. I think that's another big thing. I mean, we already moved on from Aaron Bushnell, but I mean, I think this is a big.
Yeah, Bushnell was in the military. He's still part of organized crime.
السلام عليكم إخواني وأخواتي. ليس هناك أعظم من هذه الفرصة، فقط خذوها ثواني قليلة. والله بفضل الله عز وجل الله يعلم كم من العنة والمشقة للحصول على مكان للعبادة في هذه البلاد، في شمال أمريكا، في كندا. وهذا أول مسجد يقع في المدينة. هناك فرصة للجميع أن يساعد في هذا الأمر بإذن الله تعالى. الحمد لله حصلوا على مفتاحها، والحمد لله دفعوا جزءا من المبلغ المطلوب، ولكن يريدون منكم مساعدة لإتمام ما هو متبق عليهم من دفعات إن شاء الله، وكذلك لتجهيز المكان وفرشه وتوضيبه حتى يكون جاهزا لاستقبال المسلمين والمصلين والأطفال والجالية المسلمة في هذه المدينة، مدينة أورورا أونتاريو. بارك الله فيكم وتقبل الله منا ومنكم.
On the issue of focusing issue on national issues, on national liberation issues, not focusing on broader. I mean, it's totally.
It's the most broad struggle. Everybody loves Palestine. We're very popular people. Everybody.
Except China sold us out. China sold us out. Okay. Here's what Putin's shirt said. So, Rabia Burak noticed that Pakistan, aka Tajikistan, is best buddies with China. Pakistan are Zionist grifters. Look at Aisha Malik. Look at the record of Pakistani shilling for the Zionist entity. That guy, Karim Khan, he's no different, right? Again, China, Pakistan, they're both Zionist grifters.
Everybody loves them. You know, it's great. It wins hearts and minds. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, Hamas literally killed every ISIS guy in Gaza. Like, they killed every single one. There was like a tiny offshoot of like Palestinian ISIS that was most likely fucking funded by the Mossad. You know what they would do? They'd go out into the corner. They had the shittiest rockets. They couldn't build any because they had no friends. They'd shoot off one rocket, and then Israel would fucking assassinate like 25 people. You know, like that's my God. I forgot about that. That feels like 100 years ago. These wars are normally very short. Like, I kind of chart my life.
Now look who's in his fucking chat. A guy named Yuri Cohen. Sounds like a Zionist to me. Again, China's Zionist.
Progress through the wars, and this one being so long has really kind of like warped my perception. I feel like it's, you know, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. Yeah, so let's talk about China in the future. I know China is pretty financially involved with Israel, but it's also financially involved with the other states in the Middle East.
See, China is pretty financially involved with the Zionist entity. Let's fucking go into their financial involvement. Oh, and we have also the Ibrahim Ebed article we're going to read again because it's such a great article. So over the past years, so this is an article by Shireen Akram Boshar, December 1, 2024. Over the past year, analysts and writers in the mainstream press, as well as in some left-wing media, Karl Jha, Justin Pajit, and Karl Jha as well, China Bender, Amanda Yee, And then VJ Pajit himself, the Jeet himself. Over the past year, analysts and writers in the mainstream press, as well as some in left-wing media, fake leftists obviously, have argued that China has upended its relationship with the Zionist entity in defense of Palestine in the wake of October 7. But China's relationship with Palestine is not so clear-cut. While it has offered moderate rhetorical criticism of the Zionist entity's genocide in Gaza, China has maintained investments in occupied 1948 Palestine and cooperated with Zionist companies and has attempted to increase its influence as a world power in the Middle East region at the expense of Palestinians. Or the West Asia region, I should say, at the expense of Palestinians. Throughout the past year of the Zionist entity's war in Gaza, China has repeatedly called for a return to the peace process and the implementation of the long-discussed two-state solution. But this rhetoric is far from signaling opposition and defiance to the Zionist entity. Such calls are hardly very radical. They seek a return to a U.S.-led peace process and a two-state solution traditionally championed by the U.S. Both the peace process and two-state solution traditionally championed by the U.S. Both the peace process and the two-state solution have been sharply criticized by Palestinians and the Palestine Solidarity Movement globally as mechanisms that preclude the Palestinian right to return take as their starting point the theft of the majority of Palestinian land. Nonetheless, China's moderated criticism of the Zionist entity has not been matched by any efforts to advance such a flawed process. Eli Friedman, a Cornell University professor who focuses on labor and development in China, explained that some of the dynamics between China and Palestine in a recent webinar. It must be understood, he said, that China is responsible for the genocide in Gaza. You dickhead. Are you shitting me? This is why we don't trust people with the last name Friedman. Normalization is participation. Normalization is responsibility. This is why you don't let people with the last names like Cohen, Friedman, Goldberg dictate anything on Palestine. Okay. But here's something good that he does say. The idea, though, that China is interested in the liberation of Palestine is deeply problematic, he added. China is the Zionist entity's second biggest trading partner after the United States, and actually not too far behind. In particular, the Zionist entity in China cooperate extensively in technology and military sectors. When the U.S., after 1989 in Tiananmen Square, was saying we can't sell military equipment to China, the Zionist entity kept selling them military equipment. The Zionist entity is kind of a backdoor, and they've had a lot of cooperation in that respect. Yes, I'm doing my Mort Goldman voice. China wants economic influence in the region, he continued. They want the system to continue to function smoothly. The Zionist entity is a key player in the region that China wants it to be able to relate to. Therefore, China wants the Zionist entity to be able to persist more or less as it is. Now they want an end to the occupation. China's official stated position on the Zionist entity is a two-state solution. But they're not going to do anything to fundamentally disrupt economic relations with the Zionist entity. Friedman explained that this is because China has so much to lose economically if it does. Right? So, Chinese state-owned companies operate the port of Haifa, and they're leading a big expansion in the port of Ashdod, which is just north of Gaza. They're building an expansion of the Tel Aviv light rail system. So Chinese state capital is heavily invested in the literal infrastructure of genocide. if tomorrow the Chinese company said, we're going to shut down the port of Haifa, we're not going to allow any weapons or materials to support the genocide, that would have an enormous impact on the development of things in Gaza. And they're not doing that. I think it's important to note that there's not a genuine solidaristic interest in the liberation of Palestine. So, this Chinaman right here, Carl Jha, he's a fraudulent man.
I know they've recently helped broker the Saudi-Iran rapprochement. What's the future here? I know they own a lot of Haifa. That's where half my family's from. Are they going to...
Oh, I have family in Haifa too, dickhead. And guess what? You won't see me shilling for China.
shut it down? Are they gonna cut them off? What do you think China's foreign policy in the Middle East looks like 15, 20 years from now? Where's it going?
So before October 7th, China was in a very unique position of having a fairly friendly tie with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, and Israel at the same time.
Oh, me Carl Jha, me big grifter. Yeah, you're a grifter, Carl Jha. So, this man...
But after October 7th, there's a decidedly downturn in the China-Israeli relationship. I just, before our show, I just watched another video where this Israeli commentator said, oh, there's a...
Probably the most common...
Yeah, again, Carl Jha, he's a big grifter.
question that I'm asked as a professor at Hillsdale is, what happened to my country?
There's a chill in the relationship between China and
No,
Israel.
that's actually not true. That is actually not true. So indeed, the Chinese. So, let's hear what the Chinaman has to say, and then we'll fucking debunk his bullshit.
After October 7th.
For centuries, China has been the biggest friend of the Jews, and until recently, that's now all changed.
Last couple of months, we have seen the relationships between China and Israel going very frosty and compared.
So, let's talk about that. Some have pointed to a decline in China and the Zionist and trade between China and the Zionist entity in 2023 as evidence that the relation between the two has hit a turning point, if not a breaking point. But while the 2023 dip was real and likely due to a variety of factors, let's click on that link there. Oh, it's a Zionist site. We're not going to go on that site. So, some have pointed to a decline in trade between China and the Zionist entity in 2023 as evidence that the relationship between the two has hit a turning point, if not a breaking point. But while the dip in 2023 was real and likely due to a variety of factors, it is unlikely to mark a rupture in the relationship, which has been steadily growing. China's collaboration with the Zionist entity in fields like technology, AI, and energy have drastically expanded in recent decades. In 2020, China became the Zionist entity's second largest trading partner globally and its largest in Asia. Recently, Chinese Zionist trade hit a record of $20 billion per year. Chinese and Indian companies have privatized Haifa's port, which Netanyahu allowed against the wishes of the U.S. China's Belt and Road Initiative, begun in 2013, encouraged more Chinese companies to invest in the Zionist entity or set up research and development centers in occupied 1948 Palestine. In 2014, Tel Aviv University and Tsinghua University of Beijing set up a $300 million research center. In 2015, Peking University and Tel Aviv University signed a memorandum of understanding to establish a joint research institute. That same year, Shantou University and the Zionist entity's Technion Institute of Technology established the Guangdong Technion Institute of Technology. As Chinese activist in solidarity with Palestine explains, These collaborations are some examples of Chinese university students engaging with Zionist institutions as if they were neutral without recognizing that Zionist institutions are complicit in the ongoing genocide, occupation, and oppression of the Palestinian people. The same activists have outlined some of the collaborations between the Zionist entity and China in surveillance technology. In particular, the Chinese state-backed company's Hikvision is complicit in policing and surveillance in Palestine. China and even the US, let's read that again. In particular, the Chinese state-backed company Hikvision is complicit in policing and surveillance in Palestine, China, and even the US. The Zionist entity uses Hikvision technology to surveil Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, logging the information in a database monitoring Palestinians in the West Bank specifically. Hikvision also provides technology to surveil and police the Uyghur Muslim population in the Xinjiang region of China, and Hikvision cameras are used in numerous other countries, including the US, by the NYPD, among others, despite federal bans of the technology in the USA. As Friedman pointed out, China is interested in playing a larger role in the West Asia region. It has been working to increasingly assert itself in the region following the Abraham Accords and has maneuvered to take advantage of the Zionist entity's genocide in Gaza to increase its influence. So China is basically profiting off of genocide and settler colonialism. China benefited from the normalization process that began in 2020, allowing it to further its independence and investments in West Asia. With the Zionist entity integrated into economic cooperation and more openly across the region, China became increasingly able to expand projects that encompass both the Zionist entity and the Gulf region. The normalization process has opened up possibilities for the extension of China's BRI into the region, for example. And since the start of normalization, China, the UAE, and the Zionist entity have all increased their collaboration in tech sectors, including AI research, bringing together, for example, China's Beijing Genomics Institute and Abu Dhabi's G42, both of which are also building labs and offices in occupied 1948 Palestine, as well as in energy and development. The normalization process and the thawing of the Zionist entity's relation with the UAE offers more economic openings for China, which has in recent years deepened its relationship with reactionary actors across the region, including Saudi, the UAE, and most recently Sudan's army general. Clearly, the priority is stability for business rather than justice or liberation for Palestinians or any beleaguered group in the region. But China is also cognizant that across West Asia, general opinion of the U.S. is extremely poor, since it is rightly understood as responsible for the genocide in Gaza. China hopes to use this crisis as an opportunity to portray itself as an alternative to the U.S., one more trustworthy to Arab states and to countries in the global south more broadly. In July, China brought various Palestinian factions together in Beijing to move towards national unity and hash out differences between Fatah and Hamas. While it may have been largely symbolic, the event was part of China's attempt to increase its status and role in the region. Many people have praised China for facilitating this, but little has come as a result. Even before October 7th, China established a strategic partner with the PA and its president, Mahmoud Abbas, with whom it had been nurturing a relationship for years. The Palestinian Authority has also widely criticized by the Palestinian left and others across Palestinian society for its coordination and collaboration with the Zionist entity. China's currying off favor with the PA points to the goal of increasing its influence in the region rather than a sincere desire for liberation for Palestinians. Again, what does that say about the Chinaman Carl Jha?
comparison to last year.
Don't worry about America. America is gullible.
Oh, me think me so smart. Me Carl Jha. Fuck yourself, Carl Jha, you fucking cunning, manipulative grifter. This guy's a problem, man. So that brings us to the second video we're going to debunk. Amanda Yee, the China bender.
The global stage. We'll discuss this and more on this week's China Report.
I fucking hate ads, dude. But, Amanda Yee is funded literally by Neville Singham, who's a fucking China bender. We'll get into her ties. We'll also talk about the Jeet, Vijay Pajit himself. So yeah, we'll talk about it. And this is why we don't trust the Chinese to speak on Palestine.
As one of the largest credit unions in
Go
the US,
fuck yourself.
Global is always where you need us to be.
The sole legitimate representative of all the Palestinian people. So this is really significant because it means it.
No, it's not significant, Amanda. It's symbolic. It is symbolic. It is symbolic. Let's check it out. So China is cognizant that across West Asia, general opinion of the U.S. is poor, since it is rightly understood as responsible for the continuance of genocide in Gaza. China hopes to use this crisis as an opportunity to portray itself as an alternative to the U.S., one more trustworthy to the Arab states and to countries in the global south. More broadly, in July, China brought various Palestinian factions together to move towards national unity and hash out differences between Fatah and Hamas. While it may have been largely symbolic, the event was part of China's attempt to increase its status and role in the region. Many have praised China for facilitating this convening, but little has become as a result of it. Even before October 7th, China had established a strategic partnership with the PA and its president Mahmoud Abbas, with whom it had been nurturing a relationship for years. The Palestinian Authority is also widely criticized by the Palestinian left and others across Palestinian society for its security coordination and collaboration with the Zionist occupation, the Zionist settler colony. China's currying a favor to the PA points to its goal of increasing its influence in the region rather than a sincere desire for justice for Palestinians. Right? So this is the grift. This is the Chinese Zionist grift of Breakthrough News and Amanda Yee. Amanda Yee is a Chinese yuppie from Brooklyn. Amanda Yee is a journalist and organizer based out of Brooklyn for Zionist-funded PSL, Chinese-funded PSL. She is the managing editor of Liberation News, and her writing has appeared in Monthly Review Online, The Real News Network, Counterpunch, and People's Dispatch. Again, who funds and owns Breakthrough News? This man, Neville Singham. Neville Roy Singham, born May 13, 1954, and is an American grifter and social activist. He is the founder and chairman of ThoughtWorks, an IT consulting company that provides custom software tools, and consulting services, which he sold to a private equity firm for $785 million in 2017. In 2019, Singham started a consulting business with partners who are active in the propaganda apparatus of the Chinese Communist Party and who own a company with the municipal government who co-own a company with the municipal government that promotes anti-poverty policies. So let's look at his career. Singham founded ThoughtWorks, a Chicago-based IT consulting company that provides custom software tools, and consulting services in the late 1980s. It was incorporated in 1983. From 2001 to 2008, Singham was a strategic technical consultant for Huawei. In 2005, ThoughtWorks opened up companies in China. By 2008, ThoughtWorks employed 1,000 people and was growing at the rate of 20 to 30% with bases around the world. Its clients included Microsoft, Oracle, major banks, and the Guardian newspaper. Singham owned 97% of the common stock of the company. By 2010, its clients included Daimler AG, Siemens, and Barclays, and had opened a second headquarters in Bangalore. In 2010, he opened ThoughtWorks' 5th Agile Software Development Conference in Beijing, where he spoke about its influence on Huawei. Singham sold the company to a private equity firm, Apex Partners, in 2017 for $785 million, by which time it had 4,500 employees across 15 countries, including South Africa and Uganda. Its chief scientist, Martin Fowler, wrote that Singham had not been involved in the running of the business for some years by that time. Bullshit. I don't believe that. After selling the company, he moved to China, where he owns or co-owns a number of businesses based there. So he sold out, moved to enemy territory known as China. He started a consulting business with partners active in the Chinese Communist Party propaganda apparatus in 2019. Singham has shared business interests in China and Chinese companies in the food and consultancy markets. As of 2023, his office is located in enemy territory in Shanghai and is shared with the Maku Group, whose goal is to educate foreigners about the miracles that China has created on a world stage, and has been given nearly $1.8 billion in funding. Again, so here's the thing, guys. Singham also described his admiration for Zionist China, where ThoughtWorks had a growing operation, describing it as a model for governance. And China is teaching the West that the world is better off with a dual system of both free market adjustments and long-term planning. So funding network and allegations of Chinese government links. In 2021, India's Enforcement Directorate named Singham in a money laundering case, alleging that he was the source of 380 million rupees given to the Indian news site People's Dispatch between 2018 and 2021 to promote a pro-Chinese narrative in the Indian media. The funds were alleged to have passed through a network of companies and NGOs, including the Delaware-based Worldwide Media Holdings, allegedly owned by Singham, and the Justice and Education Fund, G-Span LLC, and the Tricontinental Institute, which allegedly all share the same address in the United States, and Centro Popular de Mídias Brasil. According to a January 2022 report by New Lines magazine, the New Lines Institute, a think tank led by Hassan Hassan at Fairfax University of America, Singham has donated almost $65 million to nonprofits, including Code Pink, that take Beijing's side on genocide allegations. In 2022, the publication New Frame was shut down in South Africa, after having received most of its money since 2018 launch discreetly from Singham. The staff wanted to keep raising money to continue the project, with some suspecting that it was the only publication not to have fallen into line ideologically with the rest of Singham's network of outlets. According to a May 2023 article in Daily Beast, there are connections between Singham and organizations in the far left that promote CCP talking points, including Breakthrough News, the People's Dispatch, and other members of the International People's Media Network. The article said there were overlapping personnel at a number of these organizations and media outlets without actual office locations. The article said some members of Breakthrough News' leadership are affiliated with the PSL. In August 2023, the New York Times reported that Singham works very closely with the Chinese government and state media and donates to various groups, news organizations, and entities through nonprofit groups and shell companies which spread pro-Chinese government messages. Chinese state media accounts had retweeted people and organization in Mr. Singham's network 122 times since February 2020. The nonprofits distributing the funding include the United Community Fund, Justice and Education Fund, and People's Support Foundation. Have addresses at UPS store mailboxes in Illinois, Wisconsin, and New York, and headed by Jody Evans, or the wife of Singham, who was also co-founder of Code Pink. Jody Evans, or former ThoughtWorks employees. Funded groups including an Indian-based independent news site, NewsClick, that the Times reported as having sprinkled its coverage with Chinese government talking points. In South Africa, the Nkrumah School, the coverage, the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, and the New Frame News startup, whose editor had resigned in 2022, citing its soft coverage of Russia and China. And Brasil de Fato, newspaper in Brazil, and activist groups No Cold War, Code Pink, People's Forum, and Tricontinental in the United States. In response to the Times report, Singham said that he was not a member of, work for, or take orders of, or follow instructions of any political party or government or their representatives. Following the August 2023 New York Times report, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, also known as Marica Rubio, Maricon Rubio, asked the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into entities related to Singham for potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The Delhi police also opened investigation into NewsClick, focused on funding by Singham and its role pushing a pro-China narrative. Police allege that email communications between Singham, Vijay Prabir, and their associates established that Singham was actively pursuing the China line on COVID-19 despite mounting criticism of the same from the international community. Singham is seen clearly nudging Prabir and the PKK NewsClick team to peddle the Chinese version. It also accused Singham and his associates of creating a web of organizations to funnel money into NewsClick. Singham lives in enemy territory in Shanghai, China. He is married to Zionist grifter and Code Pink co-founder Jody Evans, who has become pro-China after marrying Singham in 2017. Singham has also become a major donor to Code Pink, with organizations from his funding network providing around a quarter of the budget. His son, Nathan Singham, works for the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, which he funds. Again, this is who's funding this Chinese Zionist grifter, Amanda Yee. And that's why she's shilling for Zionist China. And then also the Jeet himself, Vijay Pajit. The Jeet himself, right? And we're going to get to why China did the whole charade of the symbolic rhetoric between Hamas and Fatah. But we got to expose these fraudsters, right?
Yeah, firstly, look, we're talking just a
we're
few
talking.
days after
This guy's got no credibility.
the Israelis.
This is what.
But we'll get into breakthrough news. Breakthrough news. PSL leadership are closely involved with Breakthrough News, and in 2023, Breakthrough News' anchors were also PSL co-founders Brian Becker, Eugene Perrier, and Rania Khalek, who we just did a video about. And its chief editor was PSL Central Committee member Ben Becker, and his secretary was Claudia de la Cruz. Breakthrough News works closely with the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, which has hosted Tricontinental founder Vijay Prashad, aka Vijay Pajit. The PSL leadership are closely involved with the People's Forum an event space which hosts the Breakthrough News studio. People's Forum was directed by Claudia de la Cruz and funded by Neville Singham. Neville Singham. Many of the organizations above are funded in part by Neville Singham, a Shanghai-based American businessman who supports organizations and media outlets that have been echoing pro-Beijing talking points. Most of this funding comes from the Justice and Education Fund, to which Neville Singham has donated more than $20 million and for which Claudia de la Cruz works as a coordinator. Interesting. Look at these fucking China benders.
Potentially bring Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad under the umbrella of the PLO. And this is important because, they're not part of the PLO. They weren't part of the PLO before. Also,
the PLO is a Zionist normalization organization, and that's what the China bender, Amanda Yee, won't tell you.
بس ثواني من فضلكم هناك فرصة.
So significant because Fatah and Hamas have been longtime political rivals.
They've been longtime political rivals. Do you want to know why they've been longtime political rivals, Amanda Yee? Okay. So even before it established, October 7th, China established a strategic partnership with the PA and its president Mahmoud Abbas, with whom it had been nurturing a relationship for years. The Palestinian Authority is also widely criticized by the Palestinian left and others across Palestinian society for its security coordination and collaboration with the Zionist entity. China's currying a favor with the PA also points to its goal of increasing its influence in the region rather than a sincere desire for liberation for Palestinians. In a similar vein, China normalized between Saudi Arabia and Iran in 2023, demonstrating its interest in both economic stability and its own gain across the region, as well as an increased desire to hold the reins of political negotiations, perhaps taking place of the U.S. in doing so. China clearly sees itself as a player in a new post-2011 status quo across West Asia, with more emboldened reactionary states looking to better interstate relationships for their economic benefit at the expense of wider populations. China's position on Palestine is in many ways representative of much of the BRICS organization member countries. BRICS representing Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, the UAE, and other states, claims to represent an alternative possibility, a bulwark against the U.S., and a defense of countries throughout the so-called global South. However, as in the case of China, BRICS plus countries often rhetorically support Palestinians and champion the two-state solution, while simultaneously furthering their investments and collaborations with the Zionist entity. This is the most obvious in the case of India, the fifth largest trading partner of the Zionist entity globally, which has actively supported the Zionist entity in its genocide on Gaza with arms sales and increased partnerships with Zionist universities complicit in genocide after decades of nurturing close ties to the Zionist entity going back to the 1980s and 1990s, and championing similar right-wing violent Islamophobia. Russia, too, has strong economic ties with the Zionist entity and has continued to provide coal to the Zionist entity throughout the duration of the genocide. The bleach blonde bozos of Brazil and even South Africa, the country that brought the Zionist entity to the ICJ, have refused to stop their coal and oil sales to the Zionist entity. To be clear, this approach is contrary to that advocated by the BDS movement. By cooperating with the Zionist entity rather than isolating it amid a genocide, these states and their state-backed corporations and tech companies are an obstacle to Palestinian liberation and part of the solution. And shout out to Shireen Akram Boshar, and she's a socialist writer and editor and Western Asia and Northern Africa solidarity activist. Again, if you don't believe me, Ibrahim Abed in Sotoroba, he says the same thing. right? So this is from March 2024. It says, in the early 70s of the past century, I was working at the Palestinian Liberation Office attached to the United Nations. The late Sadat Hassan and I, who was the head of the office, and I were invited to the residence of the Chinese ambassador dinner in his house, of course. The ambassador was courteous and he demonstrated his support to the legitimate struggle of Palestinians to liberate their homeland and establish the democratic secular state in historic Palestine. But in reality, the Chinese, like any other state in the world, build their relations with other states according to their interests and not principles. We have observed the Chinese behavior in the Security Council when the matter concerns the Zionist entity. China most of the time abstains from condemning the Zionist entity. Refraining from criticizing means tolerating the criminal action towards Palestinians. China recognized the Zionist entity recognized China in 1950, 2 years after its establishment, but the relations were lukewarm for a long time. Although the Zionist entity in China did not normalize their relations until 1992, the bilateral relationship has developed extensively, especially in the economic sphere. Starting in the early 2000s, ties between the entity and China began to blossom, mainly because the Chinese government started to view the Zionist entity as a global technology hub and began seeking to capitalize on the Zionist entity's innovation capabilities to help meet its own developmental needs and strategic challenges. So since 1992, China and the Zionist entity have developed increasingly close economic, military, and technological ties, technological links. China became the Zionist entity's third largest trading partner and largest trading partner in East Asia. Bilateral trade, and now it's their second, right? Now China is the Zionist entity's second largest trading partner. Bilateral trade volume increased from $50 million in 1992 to over $10 billion in 2013. Already, Netanyahu has visited China 4 times, and the relationship with China has become stronger politically and economically, and principles are gone. By 1979, however, China had begun to deal with the Zionist entity more pragmatically and less ideologically. This entailed the signings of details to transfer Zionist defense technology to Beijing. In June 1990, the two companies opened de facto embassies. The Zionist Liaison Office of the Zionist Academy of Sciences and Humanities in Beijing, and the China International Travel Services Office in Tel Aviv. By January 1992, the countries had established full-fledged relations. Over the past 31 years, China and the Zionist entity economic relations have grown significantly. While bilateral trade stood at $50 million in 1992, it reached $22 million in 2021, according to China's Bureau of Statistics. In 2021, China replaced the U.S. as the Zionist entity's top source of imports, and the Zionist entity established the renminbi to its foreign reserves. The attitudes of China, Russia, and the United States are all similar and identical based on self-interest, profits, and gains. These unjust positions and the constant continuation of genocide have taught the resistance in the Gaza a lesson, not to depend on others to liberate Palestine, and the events in the Gaza taught the world a lesson that revealed the Zionist entity as a colonialist settler entity that must end and be replaced by a secular democratic Palestine in all of historic Palestine. Any individual, establishment, or state that deals with the Zionist racist entity or befriends it is considered a partner of genocide in Palestine. Again, why is the Chinese diaspora and Breakthrough News, which has ties to Neville, which is funded by Neville Singham, who is a Chinese Zionist propagandist? Why is the Chinaman Carl Jha and the Justin Pajit, why are they shilling for Zionist India and Zionist China? Why is the Chinaman Carl Jha? Why is the Chinaman Carl Jha shilling for Zionist China with literal Palestinians? Why is Vijay Pajit shilling for Zionist China on India and the global grift? I mean, it seems all fishy to me. It seems all fishy to me. So the Chinese diaspora and the Indian diaspora, they're full of Zionist grifters, and this is why you can't trust them. So there you go.